Welcome to a new series called Sean's Railroading Adventures. In this series, we'll travel from one city to another by train. We will be going from Philadelphia to Chicago, but first we must drive to 30th Street Station, then get on board the Pennsylvanian. From there, we'll stop at Pittsburgh and get on board the Capital Limited. Then we'll ride all the way from there to Chicago. We are getting close to 30th Street in Philadelphia. We get a good view of some MLW equipment, mostly painted in green, including one car in orange. After a few more minutes, we make it to 30th Street Station and pay for our parking. But we have a couple of hours to spare before the Pennsylvanian leaves for Pittsburgh, so we decide to check out some action on the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transit Authority, also known as SEPTA. As one of the trains awaits departure, number 283 passes by all on its own. Number 445 starts to chase 283 out of the station. Shortly after that, number 283 backs into another platform. Followed by another SEPTA train with more modern equipment. On the weekdays, SEPTA is very busy in 30th Street Station, with lots of trains coming and going. Nearby, two CSX diesels cross the SEPTA tracks on a bridge. After catching the two freight diesels, we get back to the SEPTA action as another passenger train leaves the station. A 4-car passenger train pulls into the station. With all the railroading activity in Philadelphia, it's safe to say that it's the Chicago of Pennsylvania. We're on top of a parking garage to get a good view of the Amtrak activity. 4 cars from Amtrak's 40th anniversary train are in one of the sidings. Two ACS-64s are double-heading a train out of 30th Street Station. We catch another ACS-64 with a P-42 Genesis in one of the maintenance sidings. But there's also a second Genesis, and we focus on that for a few seconds. We also take a look at Amtrak number 572, along with some ballast cars. A SEPTA passenger train is seen in the background leaving 30th Street Station. We also take a look at the SEPTA yards not far away from the train. You can't see it from here, but I saw what appeared to be either an AEM-7 or an ALP-44. SEPTA only had one ALP-44 and 7 AEM-7s. Another SEPTA passenger train is seen pulling into the station. We catch two SEPTA passenger trains going across the Schuylkill River, and they're both going in opposite directions. We take a brief moment to enjoy Philadelphia's skyline. One of the P-42s seen here, number 86, will be taking the Pennsylvanian into Pittsburgh, which is the train that we will be riding on. The Acela leaves 30th Street as it heads for Boston. Three Amtrak diesels, with one of them still wearing gray and black, pull into another siding between the ACS-64 and the two Genesis locomotives. A CSX freight train with two diesels travels parallel to the Schuylkill River. It's amazing that two diesels can pull a very long freight train like this. This freight train is on the Philadelphia subdivision. It is most likely heading for Park Junction, which also serves the Harrisburg line and the Trenton subdivision. The Harrisburg line is not to be confused with Norfolk Southern's Harrisburg division. Like many parts of CSX, the Philadelphia subdivision was originally run by the Baltimore and Ohio, between Philadelphia and Baltimore, Maryland. Oh, and speaking of Norfolk Southern, it looks like one of their boxcars are part of this train. A SEPTA passenger train gets out of town, crossing the bridge that goes over the CSX line, and the freight train is still going. Another SEPTA passenger train is seen going over the CSX train as it pulls into 30th Street. The last car can be seen as another SEPTA passenger train pulls into 30th Street. It's time to get on board. There wasn't a whole lot to film between Philadelphia and Harrisburg, but I did enjoy the journey.
Pennsylvanian. This is not a Keystone train.
Now we are in Harrisburg. Norfolk Southern delayed our train many times, and this is where it all began. Although it did give me plenty of time to enjoy everything I saw here. There was a good variety in MOW equipment, rolling stock, and locomotives. It was nice to see something on Norfolk Southern with a standard cab for a change.
No problem.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Your eyes aren't playing tricks on you. That's a Penn Central gondola. Also seen here is a Conrail caboose. Aside from a heritage unit, Norfolk Southern doesn't operate any engines painted in Conrail blue, but there are a lot of freight cars on the line that still have the Conrail logo. The white rig pacing us is a Volvo. We still get a good view of it until this happened. This is where things get interesting. An intermodal train starts to leave the yard. You'll see it pacing us within a few seconds. Neither train was going fast, but I could feel the excitement as we raced to the end of the yard. Although, I have to be honest, I did have a feeling that Norfolk Southern would try to derail us on purpose.
Pittsburgh for you. And Johnstown here. Okay, Lewistown here.
Here comes Amtrak, coming by the fuel patch.
Pittsburgh here.
I should also add that I was amused by the engineer blowing the horn multiple times as we continued to pace the Norfolk Southern train. We catch more Norfolk Southern engines, including Union Pacific 8898, an SD70AH, or as I like to call it, an SD70A. More Norfolk Southern engines can be seen between the containers. One of them appears to have a high hood. The engineer of our train slowly begins to pick up speed. The intermodal train is stopped. We have won the race.
Unfortunately, smokers, there are no breaks between here and the Pittsburgh stop. Station times, not allowing time for a smoke break. These are all going to be 1-minute stops. Again, we're around 30 minutes late at this moment, and we try not to lose any more time. Again, we are going through a work zone. We are directly behind another train. We'll be creeping along for a little bit. Hopefully, Norfolk Southern will be able to get us around them soon. Again, we do appreciate your patience today. Sorry about all the delays. Cafe car is now open for service. And when making purchases, we ask you to please use as small spill as possible. We appreciate that. And no personal food or drink allowed in the cafe. Again, cafe car is now open directly behind the business class. And if you're any coaches, towards the front of the train consist.
We finally get to see the engines on the train, a pair of SD-70 Aces. After passing the intermodal, our train began to pick up speed. That's a very beautiful mountain, and it looks nice with the water too. Then all of a sudden it began to rain. we're out of the storm, and as we continue our journey to Pittsburgh, you'll enjoy more scenery and catch a few more Norfolk Southern trains. We have made our first station stop since leaving Harrisburg, and soon after dropping off some passengers, we are on our way again. There are fewer clouds in the sky now and the sun is really shining. You can see my reflection as I film the scenery. I'm wearing a t-shirt with Santa Fe war bonnets on them. Now if that's not the appropriate shirt to wear to Chicago, then I don't know what is. This was my view on the left side of the train for nearly 1 minute. The diesels that we spot are SD40Es. They were originally SD50s until they were rebuilt. $29.48 is a GP38. I also caught 7114, a GP60. There are more Norfolk Southern engines seen here sitting outside of Juniata shops, including an SD70, a few SD70 ACUs, another GP60, and an SD60 with a standard cab. We are passing the Railroaders Memorial Museum not far away from the station in Altoona. Out of all the cars seen here, I thought that the Union Pacific boxcar without its wheels was the most interesting to me. But there is some nicer looking equipment, including these passenger cars and the crane. After departing Altoona, I took the time to admire these rocks. We're getting close to Horseshoe Curve now. Horseshoe Curve is without a doubt one of the best railroading landmarks in the United States. Pennsylvania K4 Pacific number 1361 was originally displayed here, but now on display is a Pennsylvania Railroad GP9. 1361 is still somewhere in Altoona, and hopefully it'll be restored to operating condition in the future. We pass another Norfolk Southern freight train led by an ES-44 AC, number 8162. This was the first freight train I saw with helper units. All 4 of the diesels are SD40Es. I was admiring this bridge when I saw another Norfolk Southern freight train, a doubleheader with 2 GEs, one with a wide cab and one with an ugly standard cab. More SD40Es are seen in helper service. At the next station stop, I noticed that the sun started to set. If the roof on the station platform was gone, however, I probably would have gotten a good shot of the clock tower. Continuing on, we pass a freight train with a long line of hoppers, mostly small ones. There were 3 diesels on this train, It was led by engine 7600, an ES44 DC. Conrail still lives on in this lineup of hopper cars. Several more will be seen. The two engines on this train are a Dash 9 and an SD70 ACU. SD70 ACUs were built from former Union Pacific SD9043 Max. We catch another freight train as we enter Pittsburgh. This time, it's a train that's not from Norfolk Southern. We get to enjoy the sunset, but only for a few seconds, as a piggyback/intermodal train passes by, pulled by one diesel. We have arrived at Pittsburgh, and we get a few shots of number 86 as it leaves the station with its train. We take the time to admire some of the buildings around the area, starting with the Amtrak station. It looks like Norfolk Southern also operates 24 hours a day, just like Amtrak or a few other railroads. This work train is passing through the station. That's my mom to the right. I invited her to come with me to Chicago to celebrate Mother's Day. It was also my mom's idea to go to the parking garage to hopefully catch another Norfolk Southern freight. After having some dinner, that's exactly what we did. Two different types of SD60s are pulling this train. I was worried I wouldn't have enough lighting, but this turned out to be very good. Now we're inside the station waiting for the Capital Limited. From here to Chicago, the engines pulling our train are 78 and 194. They are both P42 DCs. As soon as I woke up, I found myself in Ohio, and we were still on Norfolk Southern tracks. This time, instead of using Amfleets, the Capital Limited was using superliners. When the Capital Limited started service on Amtrak in 1981, it used Amfleets, heritage equipment, and some dining cars. It wasn't until 1994 when Amtrak started to use the superliners. This next shot shows us some more freight cars, mostly hopper cars. Our train is stopped at a signal, and we catch a Norfolk Southern SD70M-2 going solo as it pulls an intermodal train.
Kendallville. Kendallville, Indiana.
Dash 9s are very common on Norfolk Southern, and we see one of them coupled up to this train. We are making a station stop at Elkhart, Indiana, home to the New York Central Railroad Museum. This museum has mostly New York Central equipment, including a 482 Mohawk, number 3001. 482s were usually called Mountains, but the New York Central named theirs Mohawks. They were named after the Mohawk River. We also catch a Conrail caboose with some Milwaukee Road reefers and a crane. But before we see the crane, we get to look at some more cabooses, including this jade green one with the more modern New York Central logo. It was called the Cigar Band. There is also a car from the Chicago South Shore in South Bend, which has a lot of rust and some graffiti. After admiring the equipment at the New York Central Railroad Museum, we catch another Norfolk Southern freight with two -9s. In the background, we begin to see more hoppers. Then eventually we find more freight cars. We find more Norfolk Southern locomotives, and in the background, two Canadian Pacific locomotives. Conrail equipment is still very common to see, but it was nice to catch a Norfolk and Western freight car for a change. Snowplows and other Conrail equipment, including another caboose. Several Union Pacific engines are in a siding, with only one Norfolk Southern locomotive. We've made another station stop. We're slowly picking up speed again as we go under a bridge, then go through a railroad crossing. We catch a Norfolk and Western coil car along with a Southern gondola. Here's another first for me, Iowa interstate freight cars. It would have been nice if I caught an Iowa interstate engine as well, but that'll have to wait for another time. I did, however, catch a CSX Heritage unit with the Seaboard System logo. After admiring some Norfolk Southern hoppers, we go parallel to the Chicago, South Shore, and South Bend. Today it is called the South Shore Line, but I still prefer calling it by its original name. We catch a freight train on the South Shore Line, but it's being pulled by Union Pacific engines. We are in Chicago. The first train that we catch is on the Canadian National. The third engine is still wearing the orange paint scheme of the Elgin, Joliet, and Eastern. The Canadian National purchased the EJ&E in 2009. We catch another Norfolk Southern intermodal as we get closer to the heart of Chicago. Pulling this train is an SD60 with a standard cab. It is teamed up with two more modern locomotives from General Electric. 7592 is an ES44 DC, and 3674 is an ET44 AC. We get more action from Canadian National as we catch a Wisconsin Central locomotive. The Canadian National also purchased the WC. Here is a big line of CSX hoppers. I thought there would be a few CSX engines nearby, but I was a little surprised when I saw Norfolk Southern instead. The engine coupled up to this train is from the Chicago Short Line. There's a caboose between that engine and our train. There's another switcher painted in yellow, coupled up to these tankers. Whoa, here's a neat surprise. It's the track geometry car. Thankfully, since we're on a train, we don't have to pay for the toll here. More intermodal cars can be seen here, with most of them being empty.
Ladies and gentlemen, in the 2900 sleeper right now, we're going through Chinatown. Chicago's Chinatown. We're going to be crossing the Chicago River and then on into Amtrak yards. From there on into the station. If you have bags, check through. To Chicago, we have CHI on your baggage claim check. You're going to pick them up inside the station at the baggage claim area. Once you enter the station, you'll make a left. Go straight ahead up the ramp. Once you get to the top of the ramp, that's where you'll find the baggage claim area. If your bags are checked further, those transfers will be made for you. You'll claim your bags once you arrive at your final destination. We have a first-class lounge here in Chicago named the Metropolitan Lounge. It's a new lounge. It's a nice lounge. It's a bigger lounge. A few more amenities for you. It's located right off the main hall. There will be gate agents that can direct you to the lounge. Please note, if you have a coach ticket for the next leg of your journey, you're still welcome to use the Metropolitan Lounge to visit your sleeping car accommodations on train 29. As far as our arrival procedures, I ask that everybody please stay safely seated in your accommodations until we do come to a final stop inside Union Station. In the yards, we'll be going through.
After catching another Norfolk Southern engine, we catch a couple of Metra trains. Notice the BNSF markings on some of the cars.
Odometer, I see, please.
We're now inside Chicago's Union Station. One of Amtrak's newest locomotives, the SC-44 Charger, is to the right. Before leaving Union Station, we get another look at Genesis number 86. And we also get to see another SC-44 Charger before stepping outside of the station. Philadelphia and Chicago have a few things in common. They are two of the largest cities in the United States, with Philadelphia being the 5th largest and Chicago being the 3rd. There are also a lot of trains, tall buildings, and boats. After walking a couple of miles, my mom and I decided to enjoy looking at some of the boats. We catch another boat from the Shoreline Sightseeing Company. We decide to take a break from the trains and ride on one of these.
Masonry wall, that brick wall you're using for support, must increase at the base 6 inches for every new floor. So if you start going very high, you lose all your
During this trip, you'll get the chance to enjoy seeing some boats, buildings, bridges, and even a couple of trains.
For Chicago in 1885. A Civil War bridge builder, Rid Frey, and the hang-the-weighted internal skeleton reaching 12 stories paves the way for the modern skyscraper. These early steel frame buildings, 1885 to 19, in Bastille. Bastille from the French for seesaw. Yeah, each leaf turns around a trunnion. Wednesdays and Saturdays they open the bridges for sailboats, so we may see that later on. They'd all be coming up from the South Branch. A little river history. Chicago used the river as a sewer, so that pollution went into the lake, our drinking water. 12% of Chicago died from typhoid and cholera epidemics, repeatedly.
Wow.
So to stop the river from polluting the lake in 1900, it's out of the lake, yay. We save our drinking water, Lake Michigan, and we send all that pollution south to St. Louis, Missouri instead. I do apologize to any friends from St. Louis for that. Now, under construction on the left is a new wave of architecture coming out of Chicago from a young woman, Jeannie Gang, her company Studio Gang. The Vista Towers, as they're going to be called, are going to be well over 1,000 feet, and that will give Jeannie the title of having the tallest building in the world by a woman-led architectural firm. She'll take that title away from herself. She holds it right now for her 859-foot Aqua building. A little foggy, but yeah, we can actually see the balconies. This is Jeannie's first skyscraper behind the triangular Swiss Hotel. Modernism with a twist. Very dense plaza here. So Jeannie and her assistants would find a view like Millennium Park, and then using models, point a laser from the park back towards Jeannie's building. If the laser went directly in your window, everything's copacetic, you had a view. If the laser hit the wall, Jeannie would pick the balcony up and move it over a couple feet to the left. So it's Chicago in 1938. This rather modern style around the globe. You see the glass box on the right, the Fidelity building. That's a prime example of modernism. Highly articulated structure, attention to detail, but no decoration. That building with a mosque-like Moorish yellow dome on our right rapidly disappeared. We'll try to see that again. But that was the Hotel Intercontinental. It began its life in 1930 as the Medina Athletic Club, a project of the philanthropic group called the King William Wrigley Jr. 1921. North Face added in 1924. William Wrigley Jr. premiered Juicy Fruit Gum at the Columbian Exposition. He built the tower in Seville, in Spain. And from my favorite London architect, Sir Norman Foster, a brand new Apple store here on Michigan Avenue in 1779. Looming on the right was Spire from Adrian Smith, Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, 2009. This is Trump International Hotel and Tower. Not taller than the Trump Tower, but on the way back, as the fog clears, you'll see why it is legitimately the second tallest building.
As the tour guide continues sharing many wonderful points of interest around Chicago, we notice two of the drawbridges rising in front of us.
Oh, real quick, a picture of this space. Skeleton is your frame, skin is your glass curtain wall. Space is a square.
Rocks were falling from one of the bridges when it rose, but thankfully, no one was hurt.
Style modernists that arrived at the people went that we should forget architecture's rich history, not knowing what business is the future. It kind of happened for a long time. Now, I come from the opposite point of view. I'm actually personally a big fan of adaptive reuse.
We pass another shoreline sightseeing boat, the Skyview.
Music brunches on weekends. Now, the architect George Neiman's was associated with the Prairie School. Prairie School architect.
This next boat is not from the Shoreline Sightseeing Company.
And I invented the word de-widen, so I would not use that in scrapbook. It's not a very 5 feet, get through the softer clay to hard path, oxidized clay. And on our right, one of the grandest examples of Art Deco, that rather streamlined, angular look, coming out of America prior to completion of the Pentagon. 4,600 windows, 7 miles of hallways. They had to give this building its own zip code. It actually cost $32 million for 500 to 900 feet. Well, that was the site of the Miller House Tavern in 1827. Now, the new striking office complex with the archway, the new log cabin hotel called the Saguenash, Potawatomi for Englishmen, Chicago's only hotel, was not run by the English. This is a piece of history. This was the Chicago-Galena Union Railroad, which started in 1848.
That railroad bridge may be abandoned, but it was still nice to see.
The rest of the time we keep it around to scare the people, living over here at Fulton House, here in leased 1981, one of the first loft conversion units. 3-foot thick masonry walls. That building, we said to defrost it for a year and scrape the horsehair off the walls before he could punch.
We start to turn around, but our tour is nowhere near done. We catch a subway, then later, we see a nice looking boat from Chicago Water Taxi.
It's the caissons, folks. In this case, the caisson. Look at that little roof area. Can you see the holes up there? That was actually a reference to the salt company that put them when they were the first flag. Now, Chicago in the 1800s gave the railroads all this riverfront land, so we would entice the railroads to bring their tracks through Chicago and make us the railroad hub. We were the hobo capital of America when everybody was hopping freight trains to build this country. Madison Street was the main stem, known as Hobohemia. Hobos, artists, and the Wobblies, the industrial workers of the world fighting for one big union. They got an education when Hobo Dr. Ben Reitman actually started a Hobo College on West Madison Street. So you'd ride old dirty face the rails into town. The University of Chicago professors would come down and give the tramps and bums a lecture. They even issued Hobo copy.
We are looking inside Chicago's Union Station. Later, you'll see an Amtrak train.
You can have the speaker's platform for 3 minutes. And the coolest thing is you don't have to... Now in 2009, London-based insurance company, the Willis Group, took over only 3 floors of the 110-story Sears Tower, and they renamed the building. What can you do? And Ellis said, I'll tell you, Bill.
Our boat tour was fun. We got to see a lot of buildings, trains, and boats. Our next stop was the Shed Aquarium. That's Navy Pier in the distance. There were more boats for us to look at when we went to Navy Pier. Despite the fog, we also got to see a helicopter. But even more fun was a Ferris wheel. Our journey was a lot of fun, but this is where it comes to an end. Thank you for watching Sean's Railroading Adventures, Philadelphia and Chicago, Volume 1. There will be a Volume 2 coming soon.
Since its inception, the pier has served as a military to open doors to endless excitement. Be sure to visit the new Polk Brothers Park, delectable food experiences, the Aeon Summer Fireworks, scenic boat rides, Chicago Children's Museum, Chicago Shakespeare Theater, the Miller Lite Beer Garden, and so much more.
Oh yeah, the
Born
beer
at the
garden.
1893 World's Fair in Chicago, the Ferris wheel is an icon of Chicago history and the centerpiece of this landmark attraction.